Hi, Acadiana. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Happy Wednesday to you. Hopefully your week is going smoothly so far. This is the Wednesday edition of Let's Talk Tropics. We still have one tropical system out there, Ernesto, which recently became a hurricane earlier this morning, and it is expected to continue to strengthen as it moves away from Puerto Rico, and it does appear that we're going to be seeing it impact areas around Bermuda and possibly some of the Canadian Maritimes a little bit farther down the road. It is a hot one out there in Acadiana, 96 degrees, the current temperature here in Lafayette. That heat index is at 107. We don't have much of a breeze to help us out either, and there is a heat advisory that kicked in about an hour ago and will stay in place until 8 o'clock this evening. Temperatures are expected to hit the upper 90s. I'm going with 98 for a high. And our heat index could go anywhere between 106 and 112 later this afternoon. Lots of sunshine out there. I still think we will see a few widely scattered showers and thunderstorms popping up later in the day. But at the midday hour, pretty much everywhere is looking at mostly sunny skies. The only showers that we can find are right in the offshore waters and a couple of little blips here over parts of Vermilion Parish, right along LA 82, kind of lifting off toward the north. You've got a shower there out over Marsh Island and some more activity that's down over the Gulf waters, but as you can see over land, we're in pretty good shape here in the Acadiana region, and we'll keep the rain chance running at about 30%. There's still a pretty good cap in the atmosphere, but I think we're going to get enough heat and enough instability from the sea breeze to get some stuff going. So as we kind of move along, let's go ahead and start with what is now Hurricane Ernesto. And Ernesto became a hurricane there around the 7 o'clock advisory, or the 10 o'clock advisory here earlier this morning as it continues to move away from Puerto Rico. But some flooding rains will continue over the Virgin Islands as well as Puerto Rico here over the next several hours before Ernesto starts to pull away. And we think Ernesto has a pretty good chance of some strengthening here over the next couple of days. And there's another look at Ernesto in its path as it moves away from Puerto Rico. And as it moves away from land and also some significant wind shear, there's quite a bit of shear on the western side. So there's been some dry air intrusion. And I know that Ernesto has been trying to form an eye here for a while. And I think it'll have a better chance of forming that eye here perhaps later today and into tonight. But there's the current position and forecast track. We don't have anything to worry about here along the Gulf Coast when it comes to Hurricane Ernesto. And I don't think we're going to have a lot to worry about here over about the next week to 10 days. But as we finish up this broadcast, I'm going to show you a pattern change that's going to be happening in about 2 weeks, and that might start sending some tropical systems closer to our direction. So stick around for that. Hurricane models when it comes to Ernesto are all very, very much in agreement, keeping these very clustered, unfortunately moving over Bermuda and then possibly grazing Newfoundland and pushing out New Brunswick and Newfoundland coming up here a little bit later on down the road. And the intensity models pretty much are all keeping this a hurricane. Most of them are in the category 1 to category 2, but some going to category 3. And if we look back here, it looks like the official position for the National Hurricane Center does still keep this as a major hurricane, at least right here on Friday. That's what the M means. So on Friday, it could reach category 3 status at least briefly before starting to wind down once it moves into the colder water. So that's why some of the intensity forecast models are going for a category 2, category 3, very similar to what the National Hurricane Center is forecasting. Really don't have to show you much of the models here, but this is the GFS for the next week. This is the Euro for the next week. Here's the Canadian model for the next week. And then finally the Icon model for the same week. And again, you're really not seeing any differences between any of the 4 models that we have here. The GFS is the only one that really goes out to an extended period of time, a little bit more than 2 weeks. It goes out 16 days, but I've only shown you the forecast model going out to next Wednesday. And one of the changes that I'm starting to see here after Ernesto makes its way across the northern Atlantic and heads over toward the British Isles, this ridge of high pressure here is looking like it's going to tend to build a little bit farther toward the west. So that might keep keep the tracks of our tropical systems a little bit farther to the south as we go into September, but really not a lot to worry about in the next couple of weeks. As we take a look at the water temperatures, of course, all the way from the African coast through the Leeward and Windward Islands, the entire Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, and pretty much all of the Atlantic Ocean where tropical storms and hurricanes would pass are all experiencing water temperatures over 26.5 degrees Celsius, which is the 80-degree mark on the scale. So as you're just looking at the colors here, I know the numbers are kind of hard to see, but anything that's brighter than yellow, orange, red, and pink, that's anything with temperatures above the 80-degree mark. Let's take a quick look at the other basins that we kind of look for any tropical development, and the Gulf of Mexico is very, very quiet today. We've got some widely scattered showers there in the offshore waters, but no major problems out there. And for our friends who are working this afternoon on some of these offshore rigs, they're experiencing a pretty decent day out there. Winds and seas are very, very light. Seas about 1 to 2 feet, and those winds out of the west at 10 knots or less. And a lot of sunshine out there too, so the wave heights really aren't too bad. So if you're working out there, you've got a pretty day, and if you've got plans to do some boating or fishing, it looks like it's going to be a pretty nice one out there as well. Central America showing some widely scattered showers. Western Caribbean generally clear this morning or this afternoon. Nice day there in Jamaica, also into Nicaragua and down toward Costa Rica. A few widely scattered showers and thunderstorms kind of pushing westward out of Belize into portions of Mexico, but things are very, very quiet out there. And then as we look at the broader view of the Atlantic, we've got Ernesto that is going to kind of pull off toward the north. I don't think that it's going to be affected too much by a trough that's currently out over the Atlantic. I think it's going to wait for the next one that's going to come up. So Ernesto is going to continue to go ahead and move off toward the north and should not be a problem to the U.S. East Coast. Another tropical wave here, not looking too interesting, but I will say that Ernesto didn't look very good out in the middle part of the Atlantic either and started to get its act together a little bit farther down the road. And you got a decent tropical wave that's coming off the African coast right now that we'll have to watch for the next couple of days, and we can get a better view of how big that tropical wave is now moving off the African coast here. So I think if there's going to be out of this one or this one, if there's going to be one that's going to develop, I think it's going to be the one that's farther out in the eastern part of the Atlantic. But I will tell you that really none of the models are picking up on anything, at least for the next week to 10 days. But I wanted to go out a little bit farther and show you a bit of a change in the upper level pattern coming up about 2 weeks from today. Right now we've got kind of a trough that's over the east coast, and that picks up everything and kind of moves them back out to sea around a big ridge of high pressure that's now formed more over the central and eastern part of the Atlantic. But as we go 2 weeks from today, we can see this pretty big ridge is covering basically all of the Atlantic and much of the deep south as well. So tropical waves that want to work their way across the Atlantic Ocean would tend to stay south of that ridge of high pressure and possibly make their way into the Caribbean or possibly into the Gulf of Mexico as well. A few of those could curve right along the east coast, but as long as this ridge of high pressure stays in control out here in the middle part of the Atlantic, as the forecast is trending for 2 weeks from today, as we go into September, when you really start to get some of these waves to come off of the coast of Africa and then work their way across the Atlantic Ocean, I think there might be a better chance for some of these to work their way into the Western Atlantic, the Caribbean, and possibly into the Gulf of Mexico. But I'm really not seeing anything developing beyond about 10 days right now. And just looking at the last 10 days of August, starting the 21st, which I know is a week away, but you can see that generally most of the origins of our tropical systems are out here in the Atlantic Ocean and possibly the Western Atlantic. You don't get as much formation over the Gulf of Mexico. Most of these start to scream in here from the Atlantic Ocean and either head toward the East Coast or make their way toward the Gulf of Mexico. As far as track, anywhere that's in the red or orange or green, that's where you're seeing the past tracks of named storms, whether there be a tropical storm or a hurricane. Now, this is August, but look what happens in September. You get a lot more coverage over the Atlantic Ocean, but you also get a little more coverage of tracks over the Gulf of Mexico too. So there's what August looks like. and you would generally get more waves coming off the African coast and moving across the Atlantic and heading toward the Leeward Islands. But as we get into September, more of these will be surviving their way across the Atlantic, affecting not just the Gulf of Mexico, but also the east coast of the United States. So even though things look like they're going to stay relatively quiet here over the next couple of weeks, don't let your guard down just yet. Continue to prepare for tropical weather coming in our direction or possibly damaging hurricanes, because September is always the busiest month, and that really goes into about the first 3 weeks of October. So we're talking about the next 7 to 8 weeks are going to be the busy part of the hurricane season, as it normally is. And both the Colorado State University team as well as NOAA and the National Hurricane Center all keeping their early season forecasts that have just recently been updated in the last week, keeping the numbers quite high. Over 18 named storms are being forecast, with up to 23 for the Colorado State University team and up to 24 from the Hurricane Center as well as NOAA. And a graphic that I showed you a while back was the number of tropical systems that end up sticking around for the longer period of time. And I don't see if I can find where that one, there it is. After August the 7th, we can see anywhere between 11 and 21 named storms. Over the past 5 years, we've pretty much averaged between 15 and 16, with about half of those becoming hurricanes. So the busy season is still coming along, and I keep telling everybody, make sure you go ahead and prepare. If you want to grab some of the supplies that you need, do it now while there are no tropical systems threatening the Gulf Coast. So that's just a friendly reminder to make sure you know that hurricane season is still going to go on, and we will have busy times ahead. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. I certainly enjoy hanging out with everyone on every weekday afternoon. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notifications as well. That way you know when Acadiana Weather Today's morning forecast drops about 7:30 each weekday morning, and when Let's Talk Tropics fires up here live every weekday afternoon at noon. And if there's any severe weather that might creep up, or if we really start to get into tropical weather, I also have a severe weather channel that sometimes goes live, and if that does go live, you'll get that notification as well. And also you can look back at my channel and you can see some of the older forecasts, and you can go back several days and see if I'm doing okay on my forecasting, see what I said last week, and see if it's coming true this week. Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday afternoon. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. I will see you early tomorrow morning for Acadiana Weather Today at 7:30. Have a great afternoon.